Hello, viewers of our Stop the Destruction of the World program. As I promised you last time, today we will be dealing with the issue of corruption. As Dr. Kepi has discovered, corruption begins inside us. This would be the corruption we do of our knowledge. And this is an attitude of wanting to destroy or not having consciousness. This corrupts the being and then is extended out to society. We corrupt our consciousness, our ethics, our health, and then we corrupt the society in which we live. It shouldn't be surprising then when we see so much political and economic corruption at all levels. Even in religious institutions, in the judiciary, in the media. A lot of information circulates. Much of it is untrue, repressed, censored, and those are places where the truth should be divulged. Corruption is discussed better in Norberto Kepi's book, Liberation Through Knowledge. This book was written in France in 1991. In this book, Dr. Kepi followed in great part the Enlightenment philosophers, the Age of Reason, and she works in the media, and she'll be talking about corruption in the large mega media companies around the world. And you say here, we are now about to enter the true Age of Reason. In our second segment, we'll have an interview with Susan Berkeley. She's an analytical trilogy researcher living in New York, and she works in the media, and she'll be talking about corruption in the large mega media companies around the world. If you're interested in this book, call us in São Paulo via our United States telephone number 718-285-6992, or go to our website. The address is there on the screen for you.
I would like to explain a bit about what trilogy is. This morning I was attending a client, an artist, a painter, and we were discussing color, because it was Leonardo da Vinci himself who brought up this idea that the three fundamental colors are blue, yellow, and red, a type of red called magenta, which is a little lighter tone than red. So, let's consider these three fundamental colors. Blue would be as the sky. If you notice, that's what we have the most of. Blue from the space, from sky, inundates everything that exists. Then there is yellow, another fundamental color. That is, it exists in itself. Then we have red, the third fundamental color, and all other colors depend on the union of these three fundamental colors. Now, what am I getting at by talking about this? For the human being to understand theology, that is, to better understand theology in a growing way, he needs to understand philosophy very well, and also aesthetics. For a person to understand philosophy, he needs to understand at least the basics of theology, the fundamental dogmas. So look at the importance of dogmas. A dogma is something you don't arrive at through intelligence, but neither is it against intelligence. That which is correct can be above, but not against reason. So, to understand philosophy, one has to accept aesthetics. And what is aesthetics? It's the third link. Aesthetics is the harmony of forms a person needs. To have aesthetics, we need to strike a balance between two elements. And when they're in equilibrium, we gain mental balance. So now, let's have a look at another solar prism I've made for you. These are the fundamental colors. There underneath is blue. Blue and red create violet. Blue and green produce a lighter tone of blue. And so, for example, blue with yellow becomes green. Both yellow and blue being fundamental here. Yellow with red becomes orange.
And red with blue becomes violet or purple.
What I want to say is that everything depends on combinations of the fundamental colors, because the same goes for the lives of human beings. If there isn't a significant balance between reason, theological revelation, and aesthetics, the person isn't balanced. It's likewise for the two hemispheres of our brain. There must be a balance between the more intuitive right side, the hemisphere that captures the fundamental elements of life, and the left, the part connected with mathematics, reasoning, thought processes. So there has to be a certain equilibrium going on between these two sides in order for the individual to be balanced. Let's see now, what are the fundamental principles? First, I wrote, everything that exists in and of itself is good, truthful, and beautiful. And so what do I mean by this? Evil doesn't exist in itself. This means that evil is the distortion of goodness, the distortion of truth and beauty. So anything and everything that exists in itself, anything, has this characteristic of being perfect. We can say that the human being was created originally in a state of great perfection with these three elements. But distorting one of these elements, you distort the others. And let's see now the second fundamental principle. Evil doesn't exist in itself, but rather it is the denial, omission, or distortion of goodness, of beauty and truth. This means that one day evil will end because it annihilates itself. Do you see? Since evil is a privation, it deprives itself more and more, step by step, until it annihilates itself. So the suffering that happens with evil is because of this. Because in one's essence, deep inside, the person conserves something that is good, that is true, that is aesthetic, beautiful. If we're evil, that is, distorting, denying, and jeopardizing this natural base that we have, then we go against our very own selves. So, I was considering these things, and I thought, what a bunch of fools we are. What a state the human being is in. For example, if you drink, you're not reaching any type of glory. You're destroying your life, destroying your health.
You are corrupting yourself, right, Dr. Kapp? You're corrupting your own health, so we can apply all these concepts related to corruption that you mention in your book.
And you're giving profits to these companies that are wrongly exploiting people. Or if you smoke or take drugs, what profit are you getting from this? You're the one who's losing, ruining your health, deadening your own intelligence. You're even losing the capacity to act and to think. So we can really use this term to be a fool. Or people who spend the entire night partying in bars, etc., wherever. Why do this? Nighttime is for sleeping. So these people are ruining their lives. It's interesting. They say that in Portugal, that the Portuguese are nocturnal. They're all the time going to bed at 2, 3 in the morning and arise at midday. They say in Lisbon that this is the reason the Portuguese don't produce anything, particularly in the south of Portugal. They don't have activities as other people do because of this. Or those who pay too much for something they buy. Isn't this being a fool? Or to the contrary, a person who exploits others. He isn't gaining glory for himself. He is ruining his own psychological structure because he is exploiting the virtuous part of himself. So, returning to the fundamental principles, let's see now the third one. If man didn't reject goodness, it would never leave him. As it is said in China, when one individual attacks another, they say, "What good did I do to you that you are now attacking me?" You see, this happens a lot in families. The children receive everything from their parents, and then they attack their parents. Or the person who works in a company that treats him very well, and then he turns against the company and attacks it. People generally attack because of their envy. So when a person attacks, it's because of his own inner problem. These revolutions, for example, I've already mentioned that the French Revolution destroyed France. Why? Because they attacked the nobles who protected the people and put the bourgeoisie and later the capitalists in power, who only suck everything they can from the people. So, by toppling the nobles, they took away the power that at least protected them somewhat. So, looking again at the principles. Fourthly, let's see. Sanity is the acceptance of being, that is, of goodness, of truth and aesthetics. And fifthly, by creation, the human being is perfect, but through his will he is malignant. Notice that, in relation to these principles, when the human being starts using his will, that is, instead of doing what he must, he starts doing what he wants, then the human being puts himself outside of goodness. In general, goodness means doing what you normally don't like doing. Goodness is sacrificing, doing good for others. Notice that this has a certain relation to the ascetic attitude of the monks of old, these people who lived their lives for doing good for humanity.
And don't forget the Stoics of ancient Rome, who accomplished a marvelous empire. We'll be back shortly.
Even if we don't have a lot of consciousness, we can perceive that life is divine. We live in transcendence, whether we accept it or not. We still live in an earthly paradise, except we don't accept it. In fact, we attack what is most beautiful, good, and real. Consciousness of our envy and inversion will make it possible for us to return to this paradise we've abandoned. We don't need to build it. We just need to accept it. The Stop the Destruction of the World Association was created to bring about exactly this consciousness. We are working to return the world to goodness. Join us.
As Norberto Keppe was explaining to you in the first segment, our inverted will is a will that leads us to corruption of our lives. You can see that being corrupt isn't the advantage that many of us think it is. Usually, if we hear of a scandal somewhere where someone's caught with millions of dollars in their luggage or hiding money in their underwear, people say, "That's a smart guy. He gets an advantage from his corruption." And people think that someone who works honestly, who does good, is not getting any advantages at all. The idea is that advantage comes from corrupting ourselves. What Dr. Keppe is showing is that those who are the most corrupt are those with the most inverted wills. The most envious, arrogant, pathological, and the sickest socially, the psychopaths and the psychotics, these are the sickest individuals in their own lives. It's common for them to take medications, to fight with their partners all the time. These people are fundamentally incapable of being happy with life. They need drugs, alcohol, and other things to escape their anxiety and the guilt feelings that this life of corruption brings them. Now let's see what Susan Berkeley has to say about her experience in these large media companies.
I think one of the main causes of the decay of our planet and people suffering today is the pact that we've all made with big pharma. What do I mean by that? I mean the pharmaceutical companies that are spending billions and billions of dollars each year to promote their medication and their drugs. Now, of course, some of these medications are life-saving, they're necessary, but so many more are taken needlessly. And I have, as I'm sure you do too, many friends and family members who are suffering from illnesses, who are in like a vicious circle of taking drugs and drugs and drugs with side effects that lead to other side effects. So I would like to say that the work that Dr. Kepi brings is so vital and so important because he tells us and he teaches us that the cause of every illness without exception, is within ourselves, and the cure is there too. And I can say from personal experience and the experience that I've seen here at the International Society of Analytical Trilogy, that people have been cured of even the most serious illnesses through the process of conscientization, through the process of seeing their own envy and other problems within. And by doing so, their natural health is allowed to flourish. So I would encourage anybody that is watching this show today to request some of the books that are available to you. And before you go blindly following what your doctor tells you and start a cycle of taking medication with terrible side effects that might lead to a downward spiral in your health and your life, to investigate this science that I truly believe holds the key to stopping the destruction of the world.
Related to what Susan was saying, I would like to bring up a sentence of Karl Marx. I think that this is the best sentence that this man created in his life. Society is the place of man's alienation. Not only alienation of the capitalist society, but also of the one that he created. Because the human being is inverted. He sees glory in money, in food, in sex. The Americans put glory in money, prestige, and power, as they say. What they're saying is that the individual who gets all this is at the peak of evolution. Now, when I say that society is inverted, what I mean is that, generally speaking, the blame for problems is placed on exterior things. That idea of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, that the human being is born good and that the society perverts him. This idea caused a complete upheaval in civilization, because the human being is the one who jeopardizes his society. If he is super rich, he jeopardizes society. If he is super poor, he jeopardizes society also. And then when he blames external factors, he is jeopardizing. Now, I would like to discuss this issue of the use of firearms among the people. Because, at least in Brazil, the general idea is that if a person doesn't have a gun or some sort of weapon, that then he wouldn't attack anyone. Therefore, it's the weapon that is to be blamed, and not the person. But look at what a diagram in the magazine says about this. Look, in Brazil, there are 27 homicides for every 100,000 inhabitants. And 3.5% of all homes have guns in them. Okay, let's compare. In the United States, there are 6 homicides per 100,000 people. But more than half the families have a firearm at home, do you see? In France, there are 1.5 homicides per 100,000 people, and 25% of the homes have guns. Look, in Switzerland, they have 1 homicide per 100,000 people, and 35% of the homes have guns. Notice that if the individual isn't a criminal, whether he has a firearm or not, he's not going to kill anyone. Because the problem isn't the gun, it's the human being's attitude. And why? Look, here's a photo of the famous Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Stevenson. He shows that the human being has 2 aspects. One that is displayed, which seems to be good, and the other, the monster, the other figure there, forming a split personality. And we all have this dual personality. The point is that most of humanity holds back the monster within. They show that it is possible to be virtuous by holding back what is negative within oneself. And this reminds me of a Franciscan monk named Pellegrino Emmet. Consider well this man. This is very interesting. He studied physics a lot. And he said that each person contributes to a moving energetic belt that encompasses the planet. Do you see? Each human being contributes either a good energy or a bad energy, which forms a type of conveyor belt in the planet. Now, if there were an adequate device, it would be possible to know what went on in the past on Earth, because this belt remains in space. Are you getting it? So, a person's good actions, like those, for example, of Christ in the past, could be captured by this device which has the sensitivity of capturing this energetic belt formed by what each person leaves behind. Now, on an asteroid or a planet 2,000 light years from Earth, they're receiving the light of what happened here 2,000 years ago. What our planet emitted then is reaching there now, 2,000 light years away. Now, if they have this device there, they could even photograph or record what Christ was saying at that time. I mention this in order to say that the good human being has a good resonance which encompasses the entire earth. Especially the good individual resonates more because goodness is what prevails. And the evil individual tends to slowly disappear as time goes by because evil is just a privation. So it has to eventually disappear. So look then at this next sentence that I've selected for you. Human beings only have the goodness they do, because the only thing that stays eternally is the goodness that we have done. All the evil things a person has done tends to eventually disappear, as in fact, evil itself will also completely disappear. And so because of this, it's very important to consider the economic issue. So let's see what I'd like to bring up about John Maynard Keynes, who is one of the most considered economists of the world. He developed the supercapitalism and oriented to put money away in safes. His idea was that money was not to be spent, but that it should be saved. So then, the value of a country is based on the volume of its GDP. And this is a completely wrong concept. So much so that nations such as India and even Russia and China that don't have this neo-capitalism, this idea of hoarding money, are the ones who are most advancing. Keynes' idea is the same as orienting an intelligent individual not to use his intelligence, or to not use one's affection for the benefit of humanity. This is the problem that is presently dominating humanity. We need to become conscious that what we have of real value isn't being used. To the contrary, humanity isn't conscious of the evil it does. And this evil is what is destroying humanity. Without consciousness of this, evil isn't going to end.
So, Dr. Kepi, we're left with a better understanding of what you mean when you say that consciousness of evil is good. So, for we human beings, this is the greatest good we need to have because evil is the destruction of goodness. Consciousness of our destruction can bring us our salvation. See you next time as we continue with our conscientization program of the causes of the destruction of the world. See you then.